All right. Patrick McAULIFF, how are you, man?
Doing well. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us for the Music Business Club Happy Hour. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Yep. Man, so it has been quite a while since we have really actively talked about booking shows in the way that we've been used to for years. And in that time, you have launched Mint Talent Group, a new agency, with a bunch of really awesome people that I enjoy working with too. And I know that the big question that has been circling around everybody's mind since March is, when are tours going to come back? So while we're waiting on a couple of people to join the stream here, why don't we get that question out of the way and just go straight to it and say, Patrick, when are tours coming back?
Well, let me get my crystal ball out, and I'm going to determine when COVID ends, the vaccine is effective, and everything will go back to normal. No, I wish I had an answer. It's such a fluid, situation we're in. I would love to see next year be, call it half normal. Say we have half of a normal touring year. That would be a best case scenario. But unfortunately, we'll see how this election goes. We'll see how these vaccines roll out. We'll see the success. But in the meantime, you can be active. You can be touring regionally and doing shows. We're doing shows at drive-ins. We're doing socially distanced pod shows. We're doing socially distanced tabled shows. We're seeing some things actually indoors too coming in. So you can do shows, you just have to make sure they're safe. And that they, they're best for the artists, make sure the artists and the audience are safe when doing shows.
Yeah. And, it's been really interesting to observe, as shows, like there are some bands that didn't really stop, like they slowed down and the shows were spaced out apart. But there are some bands that have different comfort levels with travel and social distance and all that. We all recognize that if, in the business of bringing people together physically in person, we all have a responsibility to be cognizant of the dangers and really proactive about mitigating those risks. But the question of when is this band's tour going to be rescheduled to? And when is that, when are we going to get a show in Pittsburgh? And when are you playing in Dallas again? It's all been so interesting to realize that the restrictions of the state play their own role, and the city government play even another role, and the venue's ability to even adapt to a socially distanced show based on those state and federal regulations and city regulations. That's just one piece of it. The other piece is that you've got band members who have to have those conversations with their significant others and their parents or their children. And every time an offer comes in, you've got, say there are 5 band members, that's 5 sets of conversations that need to happen about whether you're going to put your family at risk. Or maybe there's only one person in the band. But it's been interesting, and it's been really cool to see the bands that are able to do it, and especially the venues that have been able to adapt to figure out how to streamline their process and still make it, financially feasible too. That's the other thing.
Because there's not a lot of money to be made, but there is a way to do it, and we've been learning from mistakes. When these drive-ins first started up, when these social distancing shows started, they weren't all perfect. But the great thing is there's been a community of agents, there's a community of promoters. We're all talking and seeing what's working for them and what's working for us and what's not working. And so I really think we're dialing it in really well at this point. And I think in the spring, you'll see even more of these drive-ins and potted shows popping up, and they'll be running, smoothly like they are now.
Yeah. There's one down the road from me here at a winery that has started doing the pod spaced out shows. We don't have any drive-ins super close by, but it's also interesting to wonder, some of these new models that are developing right now might actually stick around. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on like the drive-in show versus the pod show versus something else. Like, what seems to be more of a stopgap versus more of maybe it's here to stay?
I mean, I think they're all kind of a Band-Aid of some sort, right? Like, I mean, I don't think, one, from the financial standpoint and the economics of a drive-in, it's very tough to make it work. The artist is seeing less, the promoter's seeing less. So I don't know if those will be around, but those locations you might be able to still utilize because, you know, you now have fans that are going to these shows regularly. So maybe you turn it into more of a proper outdoor space, you know, if you're a promoter. But yeah, I don't see the social distancing thing after we get to a comfortable place and past COVID. These type of events won't be going on. You know, no one's saying, you know, I want to drive my car and and watch it. You know, listen to the audio on my speakers in the car. You know,
right? Yeah,
and someone's starving for being back in a club, being shoulder to shoulder, getting that bass. You know, that's what we all want. You know, that's what we all want to get back to.
For real. It's been really interesting. You know, like you and I know in particular, like there are some people who work in the industry who don't travel as much, but I think you and I have in common that in general, we were like, you know, there's a show in Washington, there's a show in Boston, there's a show in San Francisco, there's a show in Florida, and like just not having that type, not being in that energy is something that seems like such a distant memory now. I cannot wait until I feel safe standing in a crowd. And I'm usually the guy standing in the back because I like my space, but I could imagine myself being front and center once it feels safe, just because it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, I haven't been on a plane since February, and it's funny. I warned at the start of this. I warned my wife. I was like, "You already said you wanted me around more often. We'll see. We'll see at the end of this thing."
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So you know, I wonder if we can rewind all the way, because this is a story that I actually don't know either. And can you tell us just like, how did you actually get started in the music business?
A little bit of luck, really. So I went to college at the University of New Mexico. I grew up in Massachusetts, so I obviously was trying to get pretty far away and just try to experience something completely different. I went to must have been first couple weeks. I was looking for a job on campus, you know, and my brother went to the University of Massachusetts, and he was lucky enough to get a gig there as working for the university on like a work study job. And they had a great student-run concert department, and he did security at all these shows and got paid for it and got to go to concerts all the time. I remember he like walked Eddie Vedder down the street one time, and like, yeah, like crazy, like they had crazy concerts. I remember seeing Fish like in with 5,000 people at on campus. Is like, I mean, he already snuck me into all the shows. It was great. But anyway,
is he a big dude?
No, not at all.
Wow, all right.
But no, but they just used they had a great student organization that they basically produced every element of the shows there. So when I went to the University of Mexico, I was like, oh, I'll go do that. You know, it'd be great. Go do security, get paid, and watch shows. Mm-hmm. They didn't have that kind of a program. They did have an event and concert department, but they didn't have the infrastructure with security and all those things. So basically, there was one position open, and it was for lectures. And they said, "Do you want to book lectures all around campus?" And I was like, "What do you do?" He's like, "You research it, you call the agent, you start, you book it, you sell the tickets." And I was like, "Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing," but they had no one else who applied, so I got the job.
Wow.
Yeah. So my first lecture was Gel Biafra, and it sold out. Was like the first sellout they'd had in years because people just weren't really applying themselves. It wasn't a very structured program.
And you were doing the marketing also, or was there any
marketing? No infrastructure at all. I ran it from booking all the way through the box office. Built that everything.
And how did you chose who who to reach out to, right?
Correct. Yeah. There was no limitations. You had to get you had to get your budget approved in these things, but yeah, you could book whatever you wanted as long as it got approved by the student board.
And who was the first one again?
Jello Biafra from Dead Kennedys. So it was a spoken.
Awesome. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So you had one slam dunk.
Slam dunk. The next one I booked was Jimmy Fallon, and 70 people showed up.
What?
Because no one knew who he was at the time. So it was just kind of funny that those were my first two shows. Wow. But yeah, from there I started. I moved over the next year to concerts and I worked more on that stuff than I did on my education, unfortunately. So
me too.
But yeah, that's how I got really my start. My start was just was luck, just kind of being at the right place, applying, and then once I was like, oh shit, this is a job, I can do this, and had great support with the my advisor there, and she's like, yeah, you like doing this? Why don't you go be an agent? I was like, I can't be an agent. And then she was super supportive to me, and I moved to Chicago, and I just started interning as anywhere I could go. Intern with Live Nation, intern with Jam, and then just an opening up at Monterey was which was my previous agency 2 agencies ago, and I did admin stuff and just worked my way up.
Wow. So how long were you working at Monterey before you started having clients of your own? And were you were you on someone's desk, doing ticket counts and stuff at first?
Yeah. So I did I started my first gig, my first position there was doing deposits and just chasing. From there, I only was there for like a year of doing that. And then I got on Gary Buck's desk, who was one of the owners of the company. And the way it worked was he kind of just said, here, just do this. And he would give me like clients to this day I still have, like Shamika Copeland and Joe Ely. Like those are the two artists I was basically said, could you book this stuff? And I was like, it's kind of like what I did with the first lecture with Joe Biafra. I was like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And those two are the oldest or the longest stayed artists I have so far, and call them very good friends.
Wow. So how long before you really began building a roster of your own clients, like going, not just, kind of having, being assigned to clients, but like actually starting to have conversations with clients of your own and bring them into the company?
So because we're a smaller shop, it was definitely a slower process than you'd see at some of the bigger agencies, because there was so much to do as an assistant, and then also just booking a lot of their stuff. So I would say it was probably like 5-6 years before I signed my own thing. Some of those, it was the first band I signed was an artist on Light in the Attic called the Blakes out of Seattle, indie rock band, great band. They toured very heavily for a couple of years, opened up for bands like The Gossip, and there was a number of tours we did. But yeah, so then from there, I started working with, I think my second band was the Supervillains I signed. And then from there, we were on Law Records, and I started getting, I had building relationships in that scene, and started working with like Tribal Seeds and Ballyhoo, and I had Air, and then Stick Figure, and just it just started kind of rolling from there with like really kind of embedding myself in with the reggae scene. And I grew up listening to like everything, but listened to a lot of ska and a lot of reggae growing up as a kid.
So, the Thomas Cousins, Stick Figure's manager, has told the story before about how he was introduced to Stick Figure, and it was by you. And can you just tell us a little bit about that one? A lot of Rootfire's audience will, be very excited about Stick Figure in general. Anybody who's paying attention to American reggae right now would be. But how did you find Stick Figure, and what was it that kind of like jumped out at you and made you say, well, yeah, let's try this out?
I want to say the first time I heard Stick's music was just through discovering and digging on like iTunes and YouTube and stuff like that.
just being a genuine fan of music and like digging through the digital crates.
That's half of just A&R, right? Is just, digging in, digging around, finding music that you are into. And then once you hear something, you start doing more research. And so when I came across Stick, I was just like, this is really good. And then I saw like some of their numbers on YouTube were like pretty substantial for an act I hadn't heard of before. And this is probably, I would guess, about 9 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I just started doing research, and I just couldn't find really out that much information on the band. And I just cold emailed like whatever the email address was, the website. And so that's kind of how the dialogue started there. And Scott's response was, "Hey, great, you're a fan, but I really have no interest in touring."
Right.
And it was funny because at that time I booked Tribal Seeds, and he was a fan. And Adam, one of his good friends, whom I think they were living together at the time, was a huge fan of Tribal, and kept pushing Scott, like, dude, talk to this guy, talk to this guy, talk to this guy. So we just started that. That was kind of the dialogue, and it really was just having a rapport. And saying, hey, if you ever reconsider, touring or anything like that, I'd love to help out where I can. And at some point, they got an offer from Seth Herman with the Green, and then they reached back out and said, hey, we have this offer. What do you think of it? Like, what do you think of this offer? Should we do this? And that kind of was the start of what Stick was when it came to touring. And I was like, do this thing, see what it's like, and see if you like it. And that was the start of it on the road.
Yeah, I've heard Seth tell the story, and Scott tell the story of like, Seth actually, it's somewhere in that exchange, it was just like, hey man, you might really be able to like do something if you ever got into touring. And I've heard Scott like credit that conversation to be like a moment that made him think twice about it. So it's wild to see, obviously how much Stick Figure has blown up over the years. And it makes me wonder, one of the things I wanted to pick your brain about was strategy. And like, there are very different approaches to booking a developing artist, very different strategies for a developing artist than you might have with like a legacy or a much more established artist. Can you talk to us a little bit about like when a band is just starting out, like what the strategy might be versus a band that's, say, been around and has already sold out their products before?
Yeah, totally. I think if you're a band just starting out and you're just kind of doing it yourself, right? There's no one that's going to work harder than you are, right? And the key and the goals is try to get out and get as much experience as possible. Find out who's promoting shows in your area, and build those relationships. Talk to other bands, that you admire. The great thing is with social media now, you can reach out to anybody, and try to build a real network. But also just like, again, remember, you are going to work on this harder than anybody else. And as you get more shows, you'll be able to craft your live set. As you get more experience, you'll be able to, in the studio, you'll be able to do, more work there. But when it comes to like strategically trying to start touring, like until you have your region or your city, numbers, like it's really hard to kind of build out from there. It's easier to get the music out there these days with, just through all the channels we have. But it's still, I still find it's so important just to get out there, build it locally, then regionally, and then build out from there. And then when you're ready, agents will reach out, managers will reach out. Like it all happens very organically. And obviously with the desire of the artist to kind of push it and push their networks for sure.
Yeah. What the locally, regionally, nationally thing is something I think a lot of artists, especially starting out, confuse a full calendar with success. And, and I can relate. It's like a 21-year-old drummer in a folk band. I was like, we're going to calendar. Like, here we go. You know, you're playing in front of, you know, the empty bar. In a lot of those places, if you don't have any sort of real fan base of your own, and you're also just throwing your money into your gas tank, and where maybe it could be put into some advertising or something else.
100%, especially these days, you know, like the old school model of getting out there and grinding, it can work, but if you can utilize that money in a different way, it's definitely, it'll save you some time.
Yeah, well, it'll save you some, like, you know, save you some gray hairs early on, and like maybe save your sanity a little bit too, not stretching yourself so thin. But you know, the allure of being on the road is something that I think, especially early in a band's career, it's just like, we've got to play shows, we've got to play shows, we've got to play shows, and it's actually like you got to sell out some shows in order to play more shows, and like start small so you can have some slam dunks. That makes me think about another thing that I kind of want to pivot to, is like, once a band has sort of established themselves and you start routing a tour, there is, I think, an ongoing question that as managers and agents and artists, people are always asking about, like, do we swing for the fences and like go for the statement, or do we go for the easier sellout because like the vibe of a sellout show is its own magical thing? What do you think about that phenomenon of like the statement play versus the easier sellout?
The statement play is super important, but the tricky thing about the statement play is you need to make sure you can make that statement. Going into that room and doing half the house isn't a statement. You get to play the room, but you won't be playing there next time. So the most important thing is booking shows to fit the space. Like, you know, if you're doing 80 to 90% of the house, then you book the right room, right? So just booking properly is the most key thing, and the fans will feel that. Fans are going to be much happier in a crowd when the energy is right in the right cap than being at a nicer venue. And it's a half a house.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because every once in a while you get the fan experience. Like if the band is playing in front of 3 people, it's like the worst night of their life. But every once in a while, the fan is going to be like, it was so special. We were the only ones there. And it's like, yeah, that one hurt actually, but I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I've been to a ton of shows with 3 people in the audience, and like I remember seeing KG Elephant here at Shuba's with 3 people, and I was like, "Wow, this show is amazing! I wish it would have been full." And then it comes around, but that was like their first show in the market, so getting out there and getting a baseline of your market obviously is very important, but just making strategic bookings is key as you're developing.
Yeah. There's a question here from Daniel Weissman. I'm going to pop it on the screen. I'm doing well regionally booking myself. How many tickets do I need to be selling, and in how many markets before I need an agent on the team?
So I would say it goes, again, to the networking thing. If you're booking your shows, regionally, locally, and you're having success and like you're selling 100, 200 tickets, you're going to get the attention of the local promoters because they're going to want to work with you more because you're selling tickets in their market. And then you can use that person to help get you some contacts in other cities nearby. And it's I don't think there's a magic number of get to this amount of tickets and you'll get an agent. It just doesn't work like that. It's almost about like, I've signed bands that were worth 0 tickets, but I believed in the music and I heard it and I just connected. I was like, I've got to work with this artist. But when you start selling, a couple hundred tickets across the country, I bet there's going to be agents who are going to, pick up their head, be like, hey, these guys are doing something. Or even just regionally, if you're selling 500 tickets in your market and you're doing 100 tickets, in the, say, the Southeast, people are going to pay attention, and you'll know when you need an agent because you won't be able to keep up with the booking.
Yeah, you're touching on something that I think is really kind of one of the fundamentals is like when you need to bring on somebody to your team is when you can't do it yourself, when the demand is so much that there literally are not enough hours in a day. And a lot of artists, I think, there's no question that a booking agent is definitely one of the most important members of an artist's team. But a lot of artists feel like as soon as I get an agent, I'm going to take off. And it's, it has to be a natural build and there has to be organic demand that warrants bringing on an agent.
Yeah. And I'll say the other thing about bringing on any team member, just because you bring on a team member doesn't mean your work in that space is done. Like all the artists that I've worked with that have the most success, they work just as hard as I do, and they're working in every part of their career. That's key and huge.
Yeah. There's a question here from Mo Boogie, actually. How does a band that has been around for a while and is a bit stagnant reinvigorate a dormant fan base? That's a deep one.
Well, you let COVID hit. You don't tour for a year and a half. No, like I would say it's through the music. It's re-engaging your base that you have out there. And it's also how can you tie in and how can you find new fans, right? Almost you have to kind of look at it as you're a new artist and you've got new music coming out. What would you do and how would you tap other audiences besides just your own that you've built over the years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point that like if you need to reinvigorate the fan base, you probably need to put yourself back in the headspace that you were before the fan base was ever there to begin with and like roll up your sleeves and get creative like you did back in the day, the first time.
Yeah. And you'll see like when other people see what's going on, those fans you had will re-engage.
Yep. Cool. Okay, so this is a good segue into some of the stuff that I wanted to ask about Mint. Obviously a new agency that you have launched with a really talented team of people, and with the desire to do more than just a normal booking agency's sort of day-to-day efforts. Can you talk to us a little bit about like the Mint opportunities and sort of your perspective on how the work you do can extend beyond just booking shows?
Yeah, so I think it's key to understand how Mint was formed. You obviously were in a time when the agencies have never been hurting like they are now because there's like literally no income from live music, and it's the whole industry. It's not just agencies, but but what happened was you had a bunch of agencies having to lay off because they just couldn't afford the overhead. And it was like, if it was a normal year, these agents would still be all at their homes, their previous homes. But so you have just an influx of, I was at Paradigm, and at Paradigm in March, they laid off. I mean, there was like half the company was laid off in one day. And right there, you just cues in your head like, oh, wait, there's now going to be an enormous amount of, call them free agents who don't have homes. And if this goes the way it's looking, this is only the first agency that's going to have to go through this. Then there's going to be more and more depending on how long this thing stretches out. So it starts with having conversations with all your peer agents and having real honest conversations on like who wants to kind of go into a different space, go from a corporate to more independent, because that's where my head went right away. And then it was, having conversations with not just people who were at your agency before, but also the agents, I got let go of William Morris or CAA or UTA. And then then when kind of the group started coming together, you realize we all have different experiences, coming from these big places and what worked there or what didn't work there. And then it's like, how can we service our clients better than any shop we've been at? How do we do that? We pull together what really worked and what didn't. So that's kind of how it got birthed, right? And what you see a lot of times at these agencies is the attention to all the clients isn't always there. And the key thing was servicing the roster from top to bottom, no matter who you are, what genre. We want to make sure it's a fit for everybody who's on it. And then we just started kind of like brainstorming, what could we do, even if it's not like a financial driver right now for the agency. It could be a financial driver for the artist. So that's when we kind of started thinking about, when shows get back up and running, we could do, fan club. We could, you get an allotment from every show in the 8 to 10%. And if they don't have a built-in fan club, we could take that on for them and show them that this is something we do for you, that, we'll have completely dialed for, the roster that wants to take part of it, but it takes it off their workload. They're the manager and the artist. What's working, for this client, you have a conversation with one of your managers and they just say, oh man, we just adapted this new tool on our merch shop and it's crushing. Like, we haven't seen this before. And then you're like, okay, well, can I share that with the rest of the agency? And they're like, yeah, go for it. And so again, it doesn't have any specific driving income for the agency, but it sure will affect each artist on the roster if they decide to use it.
Yeah. And that there's something about there's some school of thought that's like, this is our, the question, hey, that worked really well. Do you mind if I tell somebody else about it? There are two sort of different thoughts there. One is like, no, that's private. We don't want everybody to learn our tricks. And the other, and to each their own, I'm not knocking it. If that's the way you feel about something, and certainly it's a moving target depending on what exactly it is you're discussing. But as far as tools and things that are out there and new ways to use them, you're either really protective and secret about it because you don't want other people to learn your tricks, or on the opposite side, it can be like, yeah, man, I would love for that artist to also succeed. And it seems to me like Mint is really built on that other ethos, which is look, if our artists are feeding themselves and being more successful, that's good for all of us, even if it doesn't necessarily translate to money in our pockets through ticket sales. There's a real chance that indirectly it will years down the line, because that artist has found some way to sell more merch that helps them invest in their touring more along the way. So it's something that I feel lucky to work with people in my greater sphere who I think tend to feel more like, yeah, you should try this too because it's awesome. And just because you're succeeding doesn't take away from my success. That just means we're all succeeding.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that idea is really driven through with the people who are at the agency at Mint. It's very much kind of family. The people who work here are family. The people on the roster are family. Even the people we work with. Our managers, our venues. We try to really kind of keep that. What helps us helps you. Yeah.
There's a couple more questions coming in. There's one from Rastan here. Great reggae artist out of the West Coast. What's up, Rastan? What's the difference between a booking agent and a talent buyer? Can you break that down for us?
So your talent agent would be your booking agent. So they're the ones that are securing the artist. They represent the shows. Now they work in tandem with the talent buyer who say Belly Up, you say you're a promoter at Belly Up, you'd be the talent buyer there. And I would be calling you to get an offer to get my client a show. So we work with the talent buyer, but it's definitely a different role. As they represent the venue, I represent the artist.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's like the talent buyer, AKA the promoter in most situations, is representing the venue, whereas the booking agent is representing the artist, right?
Yeah.
Cool. There's another one from Mystic Roots Band. Let's see. What do you think needs to change in the live music business after COVID?
I think that there's going to be a lot of changes that hit afterwards. I think just kind of when we start getting rolling again, there's going to be a lot of protocols we will be putting in. Nice one, Thomas.
We got a good one coming up after this.
But yeah, there's going to be different protocols that'll be rolling out, safety precautions for the artists, for the fans. But also, I think right now, artists, managers, agents, everybody in their own industry should be thinking about what can we do with this time when we don't have these shows to kind of improve the model to help it change. And it's, I think I don't have a crystal ball to say how it's going to change. But there will be definitely changes that happen on probably every level outside of just the protocols.
Yeah.
But I do think on the flip side of that, we're going to see the most healthy touring when this goes back to normal and is safe. I think the demand is going to be out of control when this thing starts back up.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Like the couple of shows that I have been involved with are just like, they sell out immediately, partly because the inventory is so much lower with tickets, but also people are so hungry. And, the question of what do we think needs to change in the live music business, it strikes me as like the answer to that is a little bit tough to say, except to acknowledge that things are changing and we'll see what it looks like. But no doubt that when we are actually able to tour again, people like you and me and all the fans that are used to going to see shows on a regular basis as just part of their identity and part of who they are. It seems like, whether it's 2021 or 2022, it's going to be nuts, and I can't wait. It's real good.
The thing we have to try to do as an industry is hopefully, help our friends get to the other side, because that'll be the most dramatic thing we'll see. Is a lot of people who we worked with before may not be doing this when it starts back up.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen that to certain degrees. I think everybody in the business knows somebody who at this point has pivoted out, and it just is what it is. Like everybody's kind of got a unique situation, and that was a change that I imagined would probably be coming early in this. It's just like, well, the personnel is going to change, and like somebody who was a booking agent before may have gotten into the record label business now, and like they're still in the business, but they do something different, and
right,
it's just going to be. So we got to go to this next one. I don't know who this guy is, but Thomas Cousins is asking, what's the most annoying thing managers do? And I think that's a real question.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fair. They do a lot of annoying things, like get on chat threads when on interviews and
harass their colleagues on live chats.
Oh no, we love managers. So there's nothing that a manager can do to annoy.
Okay, very good answer. But let's dig into that actually a little bit. Like, you represent a very specific component of an artist's business, and a manager, could be juggling a million things, and touring is one part of it. Are there any things that you see in like the most successful managers? Are there any patterns in the way that they work or the strategies they have? Like, what, from your perspective, makes the difference between like an amazing manager and one who has lots of room to grow?
I wouldn't say it's a specific manager thing. I would say it's people in business in general. I think communication, transparency, and also knowing what you're good at and where you need help is how anyone will succeed, be it a manager, an agent, or anyone else in any other field. I think those are the key things that we all have to try to do. And I do certain things great, and I know where I need help. And I think if you recognize those things and you're open to hearing those, because, again, having transparent conversations, I think that'll only help. I've seen in my career going from the agent that kind of leaned more on the manager for just in the early days, because, just trying to be a sponge and learning as much as possible, to being on the other side, having a young manager and helping them come along. And I've also seen those managers go on to massive things. So, it's definitely the ability to listen and grow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Good question, Thomas. I don't know who you are, but I think you'll do well in life. So man, you just made me think of something else. And right that moment when I was clowning Thomas, I thought I forgot about it. But here it is. So, you just made reference to like early in your career, you were an agent who maybe, leaned on a manager as a sponge to learn more, and you've been on, sort of the other side of that in certain situations now. I'm curious, what are some things that you wish you knew when you first got started? Are there any fundamental pieces that it's like, oh man, if only I had known that back then?
Well, when it specifically, I think for agenting, I think, and I don't think you could know this when you're starting, because you find your voice as you get further along in your career, and that voice gets you there, and you need to remember that you shouldn't hold back when you have an opinion. Now, should I have been giving my opinion early when maybe I didn't know what I was talking about? Probably not. But like, just when you get to that point, and when you see a proven thing, and you've got someone who's it's not my way or the highway, but it's like, hey, that's not working on this tour. Let's make sure we pivot on that thing, and just not holding back.
Yeah, finding your voice and like knowing when to speak up if something is like very obviously worth mentioning.
When you talk about, like, I remember booking tours for artists and just being like, hey, this is what they want, so I just go out and do it, right? And so I would put a band on tour for like 3 months playing shows every day, which is stupid. We should have never done that. Mm-hmm. But like, that's what they were asked to do, so I went and did it. And then now like looking back, I was like, well, that we could have toured a lot more smart, playing better nights, playing better nights, better rooms, and not just taking every single show. But these are the things you learn.
Have you ever seen that documentary about Shep Gordon called Supermensch? He's like, there's that part where he said he makes some reference to a manager's job being like, hey, this way, watch out for the pothole, like come this way, like don't go that way, come this way. It's interesting to think that like it is sort of a function of just like the more you do it early on in your career as an agent, you just haven't had those experiences to learn what doesn't work and what does work. But the more you do it, the more you do find your voice, and you are able to like speak from experience and say, I don't think so, but this could really be cool.
Right. And how to navigate those conversations, because those are the hardest ones when you're telling something they don't want to hear.
Yep. Absolutely, man. So, before we really wrap this up. Oh, wait, another question came up. Oh, Adam Gross. You're
man, you get here early, man.
You're asking a question we already answered. Can you tell the story about how you discovered and started working with Stick? You're going to have to rewind, Adam. No, but, we were talking a little bit earlier about like just the nature of discovering bands. But one thing I didn't ask is like, there are some artists that you work with because you have found them, and there are other artists you work with because they have found you, and they have pitched you versus you reaching out and expressing your interest. What's something that, like, when a band is reaching out to you, what's something that grabs your attention sometimes if you're being cold contacted from a manager or an artist themselves and makes you think twice?
I think it's the delivery on how an artist is reaching out, or a manager or a label, whoever it is. And I would say keep it, for me personally, I try to listen to everything that comes through, just out of respect, because I've been in that boat, and I would like everyone to read my emails and take it and give a shot. But keep it concise. Don't put an email that's 10 pages long. Make the links proper, no broken links, and get in there. Give us the meat, and then let us try to like spend some time with it, because you probably only get one or two emails before. If you keep hammering someone, they're not going to pay attention anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that you only get one or two emails before somebody just sort of categorizes you in the "I've already checked this out and I'm not interested" bucket. So no broken links. It seems so simple, but that's one that actually, probably every few days you'll get an email that's like, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know how to even check out what you're asking me to check out. If it's even clear what the ask is.
If I click the link and it's not working, that email is not getting any more attention.
That's not going to work. Seth wrote like a Rootfire blog years ago about email etiquette, and everybody's been in that situation where you open up an email and it's just like, and you don't have the energy to put into it right then, so you might not read all of it right that second. And I remember around the time that he and I first started working together, I remember seeing that article that he had written about. It's like, cut to the chase. Like, you obviously don't be rude, but we don't need to know your life story per se, but like, let us know what it is that you're interested in, and then let the life story fold out after that. But like, make it clear, because everybody's juggling a lot of things. That's what anybody does who's like really productive and active in what they do. And getting to the point and making it easy for that person to answer your question is it's a good one. Adam Gross here, coming in with better questions. All right, Adam.
He's coming in hot. He's coming in late. Coming in hot.
We're gonna let this one slip through the filter. What's the key to a quality slow roasted pulled pork? Patrick, tell us your secrets.
Smoke it at 225 and give it a long time.
Smoke it at 225 and give it a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How long is that? 6 hours? 2 hours?
10 hours plus.
Great. Okay. Cool. Well, everybody who's watching, we're going to wrap this thing up here in the next few minutes. So if you've got any more burning questions, particularly about pulled pork recipes, make sure you drop them in the comments section now. But I guess, as we get to wrapping this thing up, I wonder, what wood do you use? All right, Ryan Owens, we're going to let that one slide through. What wood do you use when you slow roast your pork, Patrick?
Whatever's available.
Whatever's available. Okay. We'll start a new series called Cooking with Patrick McAULIFF. Specifically.
Hey, we can do that next time. We could do, we'll have to rebook this thing.
All right. Awesome. So, I guess as we wrap this thing up, I wonder if you could just, a couple of things off the top of your head that you think artists should be focusing on right now during COVID that will lend them to be in a better position when touring actually does come back. Are there things that you feel like if artists can focus on these, they'll be in a good position when things come back?
Yeah, I mean, whatever outlets you have that you can work on. I mean, obviously, you've got having the time to, really work on music is, I think, huge. I think that's one of the hardest things for every touring artist is how do I find time to, write and be in the studio when I'm on the road all the time, right? So taking advantage of that time home, I think is huge. Also, digging into the, your socials, all those things, making sure you're continually engaging your fans, just to make sure they know you're still doing what you're doing. But I think right now I would say just music, use your time as creatively as possible. And really, no, there's not another time that world would be like this, I hope, knock on wood.
Yeah, seriously. Cool. All right, Patrick. Well, dude, we'll put a pin in it for here and hopefully continue the conversation a little bit down the road too. But thank you so much for taking the time, sharing some of your pearls of wisdom, as I said earlier. And hopefully 2021, shows are happening. Shows are happening right now, but hopefully in 2021, more of them are happening. We're able to work our way towards what we were more used to with a full tour schedule and packed shows and excited people and all that energy that comes with it.
I look forward to hanging out at festivals and at shows and just chilling and hanging out with all you guys.
Yeah, awesome, man. All right, Patrick, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Later.